Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This is a Federal Advisory Committee briefing of the National Artificial Intelligence Advisory Committee. In accordance with the Federal Advisory Committee Act, this briefing is open to the public and being streamed live. Committee members and the public are present virtually. Members of the public watching online are encouraged to submit questions to the committee via the Q&A box in Blue Jeans Events. Questions submitted by the public will be shared with the committee following the conclusion of the meeting. The time is now 2:02 Eastern Standard Time, and this meeting will now come to order with opening remarks from the NIAC Executive Director, Kathy Pham.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, possibly wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us today. The NIAC has held two other listening sessions on June 20th and 22nd, and the notes and recording for those will be up soon and ready as well on ai.gov/NIAC, NAIAC. The National AI Advisory Committee provides advice to the President and the National Artificial Initiative Office on matters related to the National Artificial Intelligence Initiative. The members of the newly appointed Law Enforcement Subcommittee, NIAC LE, have also joined us today, and we're thrilled that they are here. You can find them listed on our website as well. We are grateful for your service. On behalf of the government and the body administrating the NIAC, NIST, and the Department of Commerce, we thank you for joining today for briefings and conversations with the NIAC members to help inform their recommendation to the President and NIO, for informing the public and for informing other government employees on the call today. I now turn it over to Miriam Vogel, our chair of NIAC, to introduce the committee and to tell us about its work.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Thank you to everyone who's tuning in to hear these impressive speakers today, and a special thank you to all of our speakers who are taking the time to educate us, share your insights. We are very much looking forward to hearing what you have to say, and we very much hope that this is the beginning of an ongoing conversation so that as we continue our work for the next 2 years, we and the greater public can continue to benefit from your experience and insight. We want to jump right into the speakers, and so I will just quickly let you know how our committee is structured and who is the chair of each different working group. We work in large part through our working groups, and so we wanted to make sure to tell you how we've structured ourselves for year 2, which is a little different than year 1, and who's leading those efforts on our behalf. In addition, you can find our year 1 report that is posted online on ai.gov/NIAC to see what our findings were, what our thoughts and insights were from year 1. For year 2, we have one working group entitled Engagement, Education, and Inclusion. We have Susan Gonzalez here today, who is co-chairing that with Reggie Townsend. Susan is also going a step above and beyond in a few respects. First of all, co-chairing that working group is our lead on communications, and given the importance of inclusion, making sure that that work stream is embedded in each of our working groups. We have a second working group entitled AI Futures, Sustaining Innovation in Next Gen AI, which is led by Ramaya Krishnan and Hania Mahmoudian. We have AI in Work and the Workforce, led by Trooper Sanders. We have AI Regulation and Executive Action, co-led by Daniel Ho and Victoria Espinel. We have Generative and Next Gen AI, Safety and Assurance, led by Paula Goldman and David Danks. We have Rights Respecting AI, led by Janet Haven and Liz O'Sullivan. We have the International Arena, Collaboration on AI Policy and AI-Enabled Solutions, led by Victoria Espinel, and our Law Enforcement Subcommittee, led by Jane Bainbauer. So we are all listening in today, and we'll be taking notes and looking forward to hearing what you have to say, as well as some Q&A after. Back to you, Kathy.
Thank you so much, Miriam. And now for the reason why you all are here and why everyone in the public is listening in, we will go around and have each of our experts share in 3 minutes their background, the work of their organizations, and anything they'd like to share in remarks to the committee as they do their work in advising the President and NIO. And then we will open it up for conversations with each other and members of the NIAC to ask questions. So to kick us off, we will go in alphabetical order by institution name. And we will start off with ACEL AI Institute and Latinx AI programs with Laura Montoya. Over to you, Laura.
Hi, thank you everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, the opportunity to share information about our organization and our membership base. So essentially the mission of our organization, Excel AI Institute, is to accelerate artificial intelligence for social impact initiatives. This happens through many different efforts. Primarily we focus on research. We also do consulting. We run workshops and educational events around AI engineering and then AI for impact. So a lot of the work that we do originally started in San Francisco, which is where we are based, and then we, of course, have expanded to a more global audience. We now work with companies, professionals, and students around the world. Our organization began in 2016, and since then we have, of course, launched many other initiatives and published research as well. Some background on myself personally. I am a scientist turned serial entrepreneur, startup advisor, researcher. Essentially, I wear a lot of hats and buckets within my organization, which is a lot of fun. But it means I also get to do hands-on and hear a lot from many different people across the AI spectrum on what is essentially a barrier and what can improve processes for AI engineers, researchers, and those that are utilizing AI in the long run. Some of the research that we have produced from our organization includes a paper recently published on contextualizing artificially intelligent morality, which was a meta-ethnography of theoretical, political, and applied ethics in artificial intelligence. We also have a chapter of a book being published soon as part of the Mitigating Bias in Machine Learning textbook that is being edited by Carlotta Berry and Brandeis Marshall. And here we specifically focus on our rectification of machine learning bias in healthcare diagnostics. And so what I really want to focus on today, of course, as a representative of the Latinx community, is our programs with Latinx and AI. Although I was born and raised in the US and born in California, Santa Monica, my family is from Colombia, so I do identify as a Colombian American. And I do think it's very important that the Hispanic population has a strong representation within artificial intelligence. And so that's what we try to do as an organization as well, is to ensure that representation for our community. Our organization really wants to focus on not just the Latinx population in the US, but also the Latinx population globally, and how artificial intelligence affects them and how we, of course, can further and create opportunity for our members. So why we think this is really important is that the U.S. Hispanic population has reached 62.1 million in 2022, and that it accounts for 19% of all Americans. This is a very large portion of the population, and currently U.S.-born Latinos comprise of the majority. So immigrants are not specifically the ones that are actually coming into the U.S. and claiming the Latinx identity any longer. This is, of course, people who are born and raised here as citizens. And while the tech industry has frequently acknowledged the need to do better, the Hispanic community make up only over 17%, of the full U.S. workforce. They only represent 8% in STEM careers, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. If you are following along on my presentation, you'll see that on page 7, it's very, very important. The Pew Research Foundation has found that Hispanic Americans are way less likely to choose achievement in science relative to other professions. They see this essentially as a major barrier because they find that they do not have enough mentors or role models in the space, and there is a large need essentially to educate the community on the ability to achieve careers within computer science and AI and other STEM careers. And so what they have found also in this Pew Research report is that half of Hispanic adults think that having more Hispanic high achievers in STEM would help to attract these degree programs as well. And on the next slide, slide 8, the diversity in AI statistics that have been published by Stanford High AI Index report show that the percentage of Latinx or Hispanic identified individuals in the US that are pursuing computer science and specifically AI degrees in bachelor's, in master's, and in PhDs is very, very low. So the percentage is only somewhere between 3% and 5% year over year, which it has increased a little bit in the past few years, but is still very lacking, unfortunately. So this is a big problem. And when our organization has done surveys of our community members, because we focus primarily on professionals, of course, working in the space. What we have found, if you're following us on page 9, is that Latinx AI researchers and startups really lack access to capital, to mentorship, to data, and to computational power in order to succeed in the global market as representatives of the Latinx and AI community. So what we have found, of course, is that although Latin Americans are very, very resilient, technically they tend to have more of an entrepreneurship culture and history within different Latin American regions. And Latin Americans are also very high technology adopters, right? It is found that 35% of Hispanics say they're usually among the first people in their group of friends to use new tech gadgets. There's still a lot of issues with trust among the Latinx community on what this technology could do to them, and particularly around artificial intelligence or the integration of automation within their workforce.
Laura,
yes.
We'll need to move on to the next speaker, and we'll have time for discussion with the members, but we want to make sure we have time for our 6 other speakers as well.
Of course, not a problem.
So of course, the slides.
Yes, thank you. So please just review the slides, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have following this from our organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Jolynn Watkins with Black and AI.
Thank you, Laura, and grateful to be here and really get the chance to have an in-depth conversation around all of our work. I'm Jolynn Watkins with Black and AI. A little bit about Black and AI. We were founded back in 2017 as a 501c3 headquartered in California. Black and AI is focused on broadening representation in AI by democratizing access to the field. We support educational and career pathways into the field, as well as focus on closing social and financial capital gaps in the field of AI. We are a member-based organization as well as a programmatic-based organization. So we do run a series of programs, and then we are a collaborative space for artificial intelligence practitioners and emerging practitioners in the field. But I'd like to tell you a little bit about our programs. We've run, most of our participants are those who are emerging AI researchers, so those who are either in or interested in pursuing masters or PhDs in CS, that's computer science, and we have a flagship program that's called our grad program, which is a mentoring program to help people matriculate through the process for master's and PhD, ultimately to land into universities either here in the States or in Europe. The Black and AI community and membership base is global. We have over 5,100 members across 43 countries. Our membership base consists of about 68% seasoned AI professionals, with a little over 25% that are emerging practitioners, and the remainder are allies, or what we consider allies. Our participants in our graduate program and some of our other research programs are typically, again, doctoral students, but over 50% of them are outside of the United States. And that is a real key differentiator with some of the work that we're doing in the audience or the stakeholders that we are trying to add value to, as well as center their needs and experiences. So one of the things that I'd love to just continue to share is that, Black and AI right now is, of course, continuing to focus on broadening opportunities for Black people in the field of AI. Largely because we feel as though having a diverse representation or a diverse aperture of voices in this field will help mitigate bias that we've seen emerge over the past decade as AI technology has become more popular, and that we're applying automated decision systems and various algorithms to various aspects of our lives, from healthcare, from financial services, to even hiring or how we hire. But we're really working off this premise is that if we can broaden the aperture of voices, we can help mitigate some of these concerns. And the ways that we're doing so is, again, bringing people into proximity to new opportunities, as well as helping them close financial gaps as they attempt to matriculate into PhD programs here domestically and abroad. Ultimately, our aim is to shift the power dynamic in this space so that we're not just working on this technology, but we are the decision makers behind how this technology is applied out in the world. And a lot of our work in our programs is focused around education or academia and industry. We also have programmatic work in research and advocacy focused on mitigating the barriers that Black students face in higher ed when pursuing PhDs in artificial intelligence related degrees. We also have an emerging innovation support program, and this is supporting Black founders in the space who are AI founders. Black founders in general tend to float under the radar, even as you heard some of the stats that Laura read off for Latinx community in terms of percentage of Latinx community receiving venture capital dollars for those who are in the entrepreneurship space. It is very similar. Black entrepreneurs typically receive less than 2% of VC dollars each year. And we have an initiative to support Black founders in our space. We recently uncovered through our research of our own community that we had over 150 AI founders in the space who've raised collectively over 500 million. Who've created about 1,500 jobs. And again, majority of them are outside of the US or educated in the US and have built their companies outside of the US. We feel that it's imperative to support innovation in this space, as those who are academics in this space tend to become the innovators or commercialize their IP in this space. But what we found is that there isn't a lot of support across academia, across industry, and even those who are building sort of the next AI tools and systems that we will use in the future. And so Black AI.
Hi, sorry for the interruption. I'd love to be able to move on to our 4 other speakers so we have enough.
Sure, we could circle back, yeah.
We'll circle back. And we'll move over to you, Mason Grimshaw from Indigenous AI, for your 3 minutes on your briefing to NIAC. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. So awesome to be here with all of you today. Just an amazing honor. So hi everyone, my name is Mason Grimshaw. I'm Sicangu Lakota from Rosebud, South Dakota. It's actually where I'm calling in from right now. So if internet's a little spotty, that's why. I earned my bachelor's and master's degrees in business analytics from MIT. But more importantly, I'm a co-founder and board member of Indigenous, director of Indigenous in AI, and the lead programming and data science instructor for the Lakota AI Code Camp. My technical skills and experience are an exception as a Native American, but they do not have to be. Native Americans have the highest poverty rates with limited employment opportunities. Some Native American communities have up to 40% of their members living in poverty and have the least access to basic infrastructure like the internet. Only 22% of all Native Americans have access to a computer connected to the internet. In North America, there are only 3 Indigenous PhDs in computer science awarded last year out of 1,700, according to the CRA Talbay survey. Essentially, Native Americans are a rounding error for 0. AI is being developed without Native American voices. This is bad for us, and has meaningful consequences for our tribal economies, but also raises increasingly urgent questions around data sovereignty, and privacy. We also know that this is bad for AI in general. Current natural language processing frameworks can't model most of the indigenous languages in North America due to fundamental differences in how those languages are structured. This results in a large diversity of languages and data that are completely excluded from AI research. The solution? AI must be built by and for underserved communities. To do that, Native Americans need funding and resources to establish a pathway for Native American talent into computer science and AI and machine learning. Today, many Native American serving schools lack the capacity to teach computer science. We also need funding and resources for AI research for Indigenous language reclamation and revitalization. Over 92% of Native American languages are considered endangered by UNESCO. And finally, we need policy support for data sovereignty to protect ourselves from exploitation by large private and public AI research. Indigenous, a Native-led and founded 501c3, is working to address these problems with programs like the Lakota AI Code Camp for high school students, Indigenous in AI and ML for graduate students, and the First Languages AI Reality Initiative, which conducts fundamental research for Indigenous language reclamation. On behalf of Indigenous in AI and ML and Indigenious, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mason. Over to you, Arjun Subramanian from Queer in AI.
Hi, my name is Arjun Subramanian. I use they, them pronouns, and I am representing Queer in AI, a subsidiary of Out in STEM. We're a grassroots advocacy organization that raises awareness of queer issues in AI and supports LGBTQIA+ researchers. If AI is not designed with queer harms, including violence, stigma, discrimination in mind, AI only stands to reproduce these harms, posing risks to the civil rights, civil liberties, and opportunities of queer individuals. Large language models are trained on data that, one, contain queerphobic hate speech, lack queer affirmative language and representation of diverse genders and pronouns, are stripped of references to LGBTQI+ identities. Hence, such models regurgitate stereotypes and harmful narratives about queer people, contributing to their misgendering, alienation, and erasure. In addition, content moderation AI often flags to fail queerphobic hate speech, yet incorrectly classifies queer content as harmful and censors it. For example, the statement "I'm queer" might be marked as toxic and automatically removed. Queer people simultaneously face hypervisibility and privacy violations, for example, through outing via location data and monitoring on dating and social apps. Furthermore, AI is given a dangerous veneer of legitimacy to physiognomy and phrenology, including using computer vision to identify queer people and infer gender from faces. Situating these harms in U.S. policy, government collection of sex and gender data often accepts only male or female options. Moreover, trans and non-binary people face barriers to updating the gender information across government agencies. If agencies apply analytics to the sex and gender data, they risk 1, erasing the needs of gender minorities, and 2, classifying trans people as anomalies due to inconsistencies in their data, and consequently denying them health insurance and subjecting them to increased police brutality. Furthermore, biometrics assume that gender expression is immutable and hence could work poorly for trans and non-binary people who physically transition. Therefore, the deployment of biometrics to verify identity or detect fraud, 1, can out trans people and cause them gender dysphoria, 2, incorrectly accuse gender minorities of crime, and 3, discriminate against gender minorities trying to enter the U.S. or access essential health, employment, and housing services. Queer in AI is disappointed that the NIAC's Year 1 report was limited in directly responding to the concerns repeatedly raised by civil rights groups about equity and discriminatory AI. We are also disappointed about the NIAC's centering of a standards-based approach in that the NIST risk management framework over a rights-based approach, the blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights, furthering the lack of enforceability of accountability frameworks for technology. Moreover, we are disappointed in the NIAC's failure to convene the law enforcement subcommittee before the end of its first year. Queer people face real consequential harms today, which the NIAC must urgently address. Advancing justice is a prerequisite for and not in conflict with advancing AI. We urge the NIAC to endorse and have its recommendations be guided by the AI Bill of Rights. We further stress that the law enforcement subcommittee must take a rights-based approach. Furthermore, we advise the NIAC to make the following recommendations. Improve LGBTQIA+ representation in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. Collect sexual orientation and gender identity data and measure biases. Redline pseudoscientific uses of AI, and engage LGBTQIA+ participation. Government agencies such as the National Science Foundation must collect voluntary sexual orientation and gender identity data about AI researchers to understand and improve LGBTQIA+ representation. In the US, estimates suggest that queer people are 20% less represented in STEM than in the national population, and they experience a lack of mentorship and considerably higher levels of career limitations, harassment, and professional devaluation. The NSF must further fund research on AI harms specifically against LGBTQI+ people, quantitative and qualitative mitigation measures for such harms, and corresponding gaps in techno policy. Agencies must expand their collection of SOGI data for AI subjects, and comprehension. They must also design clear, specific, repeatable fairness metrics that are contextualized within the social realities and historical marginalization of queer people. This is critical to concretely measure biases and discrimination against queer people, to illuminate that these issues exist and devise interventions. The collection and usage of SOGI data must employ meaningful and affirmative consent and state-of-the-art privacy preservation measures as with other potentially sensitive demographic data. Government agencies at all costs should not deploy and should explicitly advise against pseudoscientific uses of AI that fundamentally cannot work, such as emotion detection and gender recognition. Such applications, which make problematic assumptions about normative body presentation, inevitably lead to discrimination against queer people, for example, in law enforcement, and reinforce cis and heteronormativity. Government agencies must also engage.
I forgive the interruption. I want to make sure we have time for our last two speakers. Would you mind wrapping up, and we'll circle back.
Okay. I'll just quickly state that participation is super important. We thank the NIAC for inviting us to the session. I'm going to put the full briefing in the chat, and we close with two quick questions. Why did the NIAC choose not to explicitly endorse the principles outlined in the AI Bill of Rights? And is the NIAC currently in the process of writing another report? How will it differ from the Year 1 report?
Thank you. Thank you so much for your comments and questions and recommendations. Over to you, Bhuva Shakti from Women in AI.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm Bhuva Shakti, the Chief Ethics and Culture Officer at Women in AI. We are a global nonprofit organization. We operate across 160 odd countries. We have 200,000 plus members, volunteers, as well as partners and followers across the globe. So we help girls, women, and non-binary communities to learn artificial intelligence for free. We provide resources to launch corporate and nonprofit careers in the US. We conduct research in partnership with universities and local governments. And we also implement responsible AI across all industries, wherever we are consulting or advising as a nonprofit organization. And lastly, we do support a lot of female founders to help them fundraise for AI startups, specifically also solving climate challenges. So we do acknowledge that artificial intelligence definitely efficiently replicates human intelligence, but we also see there are a lot of ethical and regulatory concerns. Especially we focus on bias, transparency, inclusion, accessibility, or IP rights, and also focusing on socioeconomic justice and environmental balance. On priority within the US national sector, we focus on applying and enforcing gender lens for human integrated responsible AI solutions, which means we want to advance the machines but not replace humans, right? So we rather integrate with tighter ethical AI governance. We want human oversight, but we want to remove unconscious gender bias, because when opportunities are given to women and women of color, we have seen a lot of proven progress globally within our organization. So one way to apply gender lens to generative AI solutions is to democratize access for individuals and businesses. But one of the challenges we see where we seek support from US policymakers is to regulate and enforce responsible AI laws across the value chain, right? So we are innovating a lot of workforce labor as well as economic benefits. Certain jobs are being replaced, but certain new jobs are being coming up. So we want government and private financing partnerships for women-owned businesses, right? So we want to support them with funding to accelerate digital transformation. But what we have seen as a challenge is gender bias in credit approval AI algorithms, or even historic data sets, which inherently have injustice markers. They are not transparently reviewed by authorities, which we request if you could review, as well as with classified access report, any recommendations for improvements. More women who own business, women of color, will get more access to funding and will be able to accelerate the digital transformation and the AI transformation for all of us together. Secondly, we also want to increase more free educational access and experiential learning for girls in high schools, because we want to better prepare them with the right AI skills to advance any career in any sector. Today, we see a lot of less representation in research, defense, entrepreneurship, primarily launching AI startups with less resources and underrepresented communities. We request the US government to implement policies for mandating responsible AI training for middle level managers, which is where the younger generation is going to start working going forward. And lastly, we also want to request support in terms of equal distribution of opportunities for women in AI, especially at the higher C-suite and executive positions. We request the government to standardize inclusion at workplace, especially for women of color and the differently abled. grants or incentives that can eliminate gender discrimination or increase psychological safety is an option for us. And we want to lastly emphasize human integrated responsible AI. We request NIAC to implement gender lens as applicable across all the recommendations in the upcoming months and years. Also expand access to women in AI, women of color, non-binary communities, to incentivize for the compliance with the regulation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your remarks. And over to you, Yang Sheng from Women in AI.
My remarks today are around data privacy, especially in AI. In this digital age, more and more organizations are becoming people-centric and offer hyper-personalized products and services. But those approaches rely heavily on AI systems collecting and utilizing what we call first and zero-party data. And unfortunately, it amplifies the challenges we face in data privacy. Today, I'd like to just highlight two areas where we think the government could offer assistance. First is provide more comprehensive guidance and oversight at the federal level to ensure consistent enforcement of the key regulations across all states. This will help promote consistency and reduce compliance burdens and enhance privacy protections nationwide. Second is educate organizations about the alignment between ethical data practices and building stronger relationships with clients. Emphasize on the long-term benefits of trust and loyalty. So this education can highlight how such practices actually supports business interests instead of conflicting with them. So by implementing, so this is just two examples, but there's other recommendations. And by implementing this, the government as well as organizations can actually strengthen data privacy practices, foster consumer trust, and enhance overall data protection in the evolving digital landscape. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now in the next 20 minutes, we'll turn it over to our NIAC members to start asking questions. There is no hand raising function. So we'll just have NIAC members join in, and should any of the speakers and experts have responses, please join in as well.
Kathy, this is Susan. So again, thank you everybody for joining. This feedback is incredibly helpful. One theme that I've picked up throughout this conversation is access to capital and financing partnerships with the government. So my question is twofold. One, are you aware of funding, for your research to offer the perspective of your respective organizations? And two, if you are, and if you have pursued this funding, have you encountered barriers?
Thanks, Susan, for the question. One of the reasons we are not able to get access to some of the research funding that potentially government is offering is, I think there are a lot of criteria that could be slightly outdated, where the new research is focused on a lot of AI innovation and sustainability, social justice, as well as climate innovation. So we would like to get access to that funding if someone from NIAC or any other government agency could help us. We do have a lot of researchers in the academia as well as in the government sector as well, across healthcare, finance, and all industries. But they need access to funding to continue research and provide more recommendations and support or free support to other deserving women in AI.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I can echo the sentiments. I think for organizations like ours, which are independent, we are not officially affiliated with any university, for example, that has seemed to be a major barrier for many of us that are doing this work independently. And although we have collaborations with government organizations, as well as many university institutions, both in the US as well as in Latin America, we've primarily found a lot of our support through corporations and through independent donations. And we've found that the work that we are doing does not necessarily fit within the model of a lot of applications or proposals that are available and calls for funding for the type of work that we're doing.
Okay, great. I will likely be following up with you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to say I wanted to echo what most of Laura said. We also, Queer and AI are an independent organization, and we're not associated with any particular institution. So it's quite hard for us to access a lot of government grants. And so we rely on corporations primarily for funding. In addition, a lot of proposals or a lot of grants for like D&I funding from the government, including the NSF, is kind of centers what groups they consider underrepresented, and often queer people are not considered underrepresented within kind of government definitions of those groups.
I'll add one more point, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So just to, yes, if you're not affiliated with an academic institution, it can be difficult to get funding. But also, a few of our members are doing research, and they're trying to, for us, it's very important to involve the communities. And so if you are a part of an institution, it can sometimes be challenging to bring those community members on who have a lot of that deep knowledge about, their language or whatever you might want to be studying. It's hard to bring them on and make sure that they are receiving compensation for their time, just because of the way that some of the requirements are. So I would just highlight those two things.
While our NIAC members think of their questions, I'll also ask an audience question, which is, how much funding was allocated to Native American communities in 2020? And that was from Caroline Runningwolf.
How much funding was available for Native American
communities in 2022?
Ooh, that is a great question. I would say that it's hard for any one group to know. We try to. The funny thing about, it's not funny, but one of the challenges about working with Native American groups is that we're all our own communities, right? So I'm Lakota, and that there's a specific place and space for us and the way that we talk about the world. And there's tons of other groups, even within South Dakota, there are different groups. So it would be hard for me to have a number. I don't have that number on hand, but it's a good number. And it's probably something that, I don't know, maybe a NIAC member could answer better than I could, but it's hard for us to know across all nations that exist, even in the United States. And of course, they're more in North America, but yeah.
Thank you, Mason. Over to you, Miriam. I'm told there's a storm in DC that's affecting quite a lot of people's connectivities right now.
Yep, I'm part of that as well. Mason, thank you. I think that was a really actually instructive and helpful comment about the dynamics, the realities of how hard it is to get at this information, particularly when you're talking about the communities that you're representing that are where data might be collected in a dispersed way or not at all. And something we need to do better on. So thank you for for sharing the answer you can, as well as pointing out a gap where we need to do better. I was jumping into, again, just first of all, to thank you all. I think hearing the blend of very tactical, thoughtful work that you're doing, the Lakota AI Code Camps, and so many of the others that you shared, giving the practical examples of where AI is harming your community specifically, the queries that are misrepresenting or shutting you out. It's just very, very instructive, as well as the important research. So just, again, thank you for the really helpful information you're giving. But I also wanted to make sure to be responding to the questions that you put out. Again, dealing with the realities that we have at hand, I think it's been instructive for a lot of the NIAC members to understand some of the basic challenges in government. And while we have been looking forward to our law enforcement subcommittee starting for as long as we've been in creation, and even before we were officially formed, obviously that's just outside of our power. And so we're delighted they're on board now. We know that they're getting up to speed quickly, but we shared your disappointment that they were not on board quickly or quicker. And again, just we're in a much better place with them in place now. And again, a really interesting vantage point into the realities of government and how how hard it is to onboard anybody, even FACA members, not even full-time government employees. There was also a question about whether we're going to do a year two report. I think it's fair to say that we'll do some kind of consolidation and overview of our year two efforts. But I think it's also fair to say that at this point, while we are very much in the process, we're bringing you in early days as we launch year 2, because we wanted to hear from you all as we launch our year 2 efforts. We are rethinking how we can have impact. We don't want a lot of our work to wait until a year 2 report. So we're looking at white papers, additional public convenings, and other ways to try and have impactful documents, discussions, or other medium in the meantime. So please let us know if there's a hackathon we should be doing with the Lakota AI Code Camp or other ways that we can try and be useful, impactful in the interim. Those are the things we're looking at for year 2, in addition to some kind of report. But I expect it'll be different than the year 1 report, where it was the sum total of most of our year 1 efforts, and it's still low.
We have about 10 minutes for any other NIAC members to ask questions.
Hey, Kathy, I do have a question. Good afternoon, everyone. Reggie Townsend here. I was on audio, so I think I heard most. I did have a time or two that I dropped, so if this question is a repeat of some things that were shared, please let me know. So I helped to chair the Engagement, Education, and Inclusion Working Group, so my question is in that spirit to the entirety of the panel. I certainly can respect that, a number of us who are in this space on a day-to-day basis have a good sense for what some of the ills and concerns are. And you all have eloquently stated that here this afternoon. I am interested, however, in those folks who are parts of our communities who aren't as well versed. I'm interested in how we successfully engage those folks and bring them into meaningful conversation with respect to AI, particularly as AI might impact their lives and livelihoods. So I wonder if any folks from the panel have had any success and would be interested in sharing your successes as it relates to reaching parts of our community that are not part of the, if you will, the STEM-based group that we've assembled here.
So even though we are AI, we specifically also work with a lot of industry-based communities, meaning we work with people in marketing, people in healthcare who have no AI background, but then we collaborate to solve challenges in healthcare using AI between 2 communities. So that way we are able to exchange free resources across both communities and also cross-collaborate on some of the ideas from industry experts versus the technology folks that we have. So we do a lot of local outreach, partnerships with events, discussions, as well as collaborative work for other industry sectors.
And Reggie, this is Jolene from Black and AI. I'll also add, one of the emerging conversations at Black and AI is what are we doing to really speak to, in a sense, the lay people, right, in our community. Much of our conversations in our programmatic work is focused on those who are at the master's and the PhD level trying to enter into academia and industry. But we recently partnered with JFF Labs with their focus on economic mobility at the intersection of workforce development and their new center for AI that they are standing up. And really this is our step into the direction of rethinking, not moving away completely from our flagship program that helps move people into graduate programs, but starting to think about alternative pathways into AI. What we recognize is that, of the 12% of US-based, Black people that are part of the workforce, that increasingly, because we are out of this conversation and because we are out of a lot of the tech jobs, that the wage gap and sort of the wealth gap will continue to exacerbate if we don't find other avenues for particularly Black people that are in the U.S. to enter into this space, especially given that the majority of the population are not holders of a bachelor's degree. One other area or thing that we've observed is just across the board, when you're talking to just Americans in general and understanding of just AI technology, that the education level is low, right? And so to have a more intelligent conversation around the risks, the harms, how we should be framing this conversation is challenging because they don't have the knowledge base to enter into sort of this more intelligent discourse around this technology. And many are not quite aware as to how it's impacting them on a day-to-day basis. So an emerging conversation at Black in AI is doing community conversations and figuring out we can bridge this information gap, especially here in the US, around the technology, around the harms that people are sort of hearing about, but not quite certain how this really fully applies to them. They know there are harms, that there's bias, there's discrimination, there's gender bias, et cetera, but how does this ultimately play out, and why does it play out? So while we don't have an active program or initiative in place now, that is an emerging conversation with myself and our board around how do we address that knowledge gap, and also how do we think of alternative educational and pathways into the field.
Well, that's awesome, Jillian and Bova. I would love to learn more if you all have collateral material that you can share as relates to your current plans and activities. Would love to look at that, and perhaps there's some opportunities to partner and amplify.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. If I may add actually a little bit to that. So our code camp we do a lot of education through our code camp. But when it comes to communities, often the very first thing we need to talk about, at least in our case, is data sovereignty. And that essentially boils down to protection of data. So Jillian sort of mentioned that, but I just want to say that's really important for us, is like, before we even talk about all the fancy stuff, like the community, need to come together to decide what are the parameters around which you would let someone else use this data, or which you yourself would use your data. For us, it's often language data, and it's very meaningful data. It could be like grandmas telling stories and things like that. They're not just tweets, right? It's different. It's a different kind of data set than what most people train their models on. So step one, education, is all about data sovereignty. And then step two, this is sort of something we bumped into trying to even get students into the campus. We thought that, the teachers, the science and math teachers on reservation schools would be great people to pub our camp, talk about it, you get all this cool stuff, whatever. But even they felt sort of unqualified to speak about this kind of thing. So even getting the message to the students through the math and science educators that currently exist, that was also a challenge. And what I think has worked the best for us, so we can't often point them to an online, resource for reasons I talked about before. But we can send all the students home with apps on phones that we give them and that they build. And watching their parents and their grandmas come in on the last day of graduation and seeing, like, holy cow, you built that? Like, that's a thing you made? To me, that has opened up so much of a conversation around, do we want this in our communities, and is this worthwhile? So that's how we're starting to work it into communities, but it's a challenge, and there are lots of challenges that we still don't have answers for.
Awesome. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
David,
I'd like to quickly add to that, if possible. Is that okay? Sounds good. So, so I think Queer in AI still has a lot of work to do in this regard, but some things that we do, we have a YouTube channel where we publish videos from a lot of the workshops that we run, and these videos are of talks, of panels, and they're intentionally made to be as accessible as possible, to kind of talk about the intersections of queerness and AI and caste and race and a whole bunch of other different aspects of identity. And I think like that's one way that we communicate some of the work that we're doing. In addition, we are very active on social media, kind of communicating things about queer harms. And I think from the conversations we had, we know that people can recognize, like queer and trans people very easily recognize when AI systems are reifying and propagating the harms that they are just experiencing every day, from outing, misgendering, erasure, like whether that be like screenshots of people on Gmail having like their pronouns being autocorrected, or like ChatGPT generating extremely homophobic things. And I guess finally, I think one thing that we'd like to do in line with the work that we've already done. We have lots of guides out there about how to talk about gender, about how to talk about pronouns, how to run inclusive conference spaces for queer people. And we really do think that NIAC should be providing more training materials that are accessible to a variety of different folks on the specific harms faced by queer people.
David, would you like to ask your questions, and perhaps we'll have about 3 minutes total for responses, just so we end on time.
Sure. So David Danks, University of California, San Diego. My question, and this, be happy to follow up with people afterwards if it's easier to provide examples via email. But my question is that many of you raised concerns and challenges about bias. And one of the things that I think often happens is that it can be difficult to actually find out the ways in which systems are biased when they're being deployed. So I was wondering if people could speak to any either challenges you faced or successes you've had in being able to demonstrate bias in actually deployed systems.
Yeah, very quickly, 2 examples, and we can go into a lot of details from Women in AI. One is we try to do federated data exchange across different systems. So if there is bias in one system without compromising the sensitivity and the confidentiality of the data, we are able to exchange learning, so we are able to correct the data and the models before they are deployed holistically. So it's open sharing across systems. The second thing is we do extensive regression testing on the model itself, right? So we do model risk management. So we do pre-assessment, during and post-assessment to make corrections, and also stress test the models multiple times on the federated data. So these are 2 approaches that have worked for us, and I can go into details when we have a follow-up.
I can add a bit to this as well as to the last question. I didn't have the opportunity to speak then also. But our organization, since we specifically work with individuals around the globe who identify as Latinx in this space, a lot of what we hear oftentimes, of course, around fears from our community members are, of course, that their jobs are going to be automated, primarily in the US as well, because most of the Hispanic community, the jobs in which that they are doing are, of course, those that are manual labor. They're dirty, they're dangerous, right? They're demoralizing. And so these, of course, are the positions that are ripe for automation and for replication through AI tools. And so when it comes to bias, in particular, oftentimes we find these stereotypes as well being incorporated into systems, whether they be natural language processing models that, when you ask, for example, what is the typical job of, a Hispanic person, oftentimes you'll get, that type of response, right? That, maybe it would be a janitor, it would be, something of the like. And unfortunately, there isn't enough representation of Latinx individuals. Even if you're doing like a Google search, for example, and you look up a CEO for an individual that is Hispanic or Latinx, you'll find a very stereotypical response that is produced by these systems. So some of the testing that we have done for our organization and educating around these topics, of course, has to do with the more informal sessions that we host, which are essentially like town hall sessions, where we do take feedback from our community members and try to understand what are their concerns, what are the barriers that they're facing when it comes to learning about AI or interacting with AI systems. Through the Excel AI Institute, one of the first programs that we launched and ran were called Demystifying AI and Deep Learning Workshops, where we essentially educated people who were transitioning from other types of careers into artificial intelligence engineering or had an interest in transitioning into these type of roles, whether that be through general software, data science, right, data analytics, going into more deeper areas of AI as well. And so for us, we have found that those were very successful, of course, with people that had some technical background already, but the barriers were even higher for individuals who did not have any background at all in mathematics or in any software engineering. So we found that, of course, these types of programs have to really be introduced much, much earlier for individuals to really be able to take them up and to run with them, right, and feel a lack of an imposter syndrome once they're working in the field as well. So Abuva did talk about some of the specific techniques that can be used In research for mitigating bias for algorithms, there are several others as well. When you're including humans in the loop, essentially finding a ground truth to compare against, when you have individuals essentially checking data sets and labeling things correctly, and then also adjusting weights for models to ensure that it's taking into account a larger part of the population rather than necessarily just a very small part of the population that may be included within that particular data set. But I'm also happy to answer questions about any of these examples that I gave currently later on. Thank you very much.
I'd like to now turn it over to Miriam to close it up. But before that, I would like to invite folks to go ahead and check out the website to view the past meetings and briefing sessions we've had. There was an audience questions about today's absence of any groups and contributions for physically disabled and neurodiverse populations, and we did have a briefing on the 20th from the American Association of People with Disabilities, and welcome folks to watch that as well. And there also is a 3:30 briefing, Eastern Time briefing today from various groups as well at the same link. With that, I'll turn it over to you, Miriam, to close this out.
I'll close this up quickly looking at the time, but I'm really sorry to do so because I'm finding this super interesting, engaging, productive. I'm inspired by the work you all are doing. I'm grateful for the input you're sharing with us and with the broader public on experiences specific for your community, experiences on what's working and what's not that we can all learn from. There were a few calls today for NIAC to do more in certain areas. Would love to get your thoughts in a more granular level on what you'd be looking for, what success would look like to you in light of our mission to advise the President and the White House on AI policy. So within that construct, let us know what you think would be helpful, how we can solve some of the challenges you raised today. Thank you so much. You also mentioned some other groups we should be hearing from. We want to continue to learn. So let us know who else we should be hearing from. We are so grateful to Susan and Kathy and others for helping us set up these important conversations today and last week. And we look forward for many more in the months and years to come. So thank you all.
Over to you, Rachel.
So thank you everyone for joining today's briefing session. This concludes session 1 of today's briefing. We will now have a 30-minute break and we'll resume back here at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time for session 2, and we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you.